India may be the land of 100 problems, but India is the mother of 1 billion solutions, and I welcome you at the motherland of 1 billion solutions. Your Holiness, dear Amma, Fadnavis ji has already said that she is global mother. So what should I say to her? Mother of love, mother of kindness, mother of compassion. Respected Devendra ji, Deputy Chief Minister, one of the most dynamic, visionary young leaders of our nation. We are proud of you. All the Sherpas, from the middle, from the east, from the west. So it was good that one Sherpa was sitting in my east and one was in the west. C20 Sherpas. Dear sisters and brothers, this is a very special day. This is the day of creation of a new history from Nagpur. All of you or many of you might know about the proceedings, formats, deliberations of C20s in the past. But perhaps this is the first time in my knowledge that this C20 is driven by the core values of spirituality. And spirituality does not mean any religion. It is the driving force, the soul of universal humanity. When we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, when we say one earth, one family, one future, they are not simply slogans. Each word has a deeper philosophy and the roots in spirituality. Friends, you come from different parts of the world. Not only 20 but 26 countries. You are already welcomed in Nagpur, but when I try to welcome you in India, let me say one thing. India may be the land of 100 problems, but India is the mother of 1 billion solutions, and I welcome you at the motherland of 1 billion solutions. And that is something which is already flowing, radiating on your faces, in your eyes. Not the problems, but solutions. And these people who are sitting here and deliberating for next 2-3 days, I'm sure that they will come not only with recommendations, proposals to G20, but they will come out with more deeper solutions to the problems, more sustainable solutions to the problems. This is very timely because world is passing through the age of compounded crisis, crisis of civilization. We can also say that we are also facing complexity and competitions among the priorities and issues which has to be taken up. Health or education or ecology or gender equality. What should be the priority? And they are competing issues. When it comes to budgetary allocations of the governments and when it comes to ODA support, demand not only among the governments but also in the civil society. And therefore, we also observe, we see that there is a competition among the civil society organizations on various issues. But one thing is very clear, that when I call you as the leaders of civil society, you represent the voice of most voiceless people of the world. You represent the faces of most invisible people of the world. You are the custodians of collective conscience of very ordinary people on this earth. You are the propellers of democracy. Because you can question and you can answer in solutions. And that you do. I could recall when I had a crazy idea of organizing a worldwide march against exploitation of children, child slavery in 1998 that went across 103 countries. It took 6 months from 3 corners of the world. My belief was the young people, the children, women, but in an institutional manner, civil society organizations. And definitely the governments have supported it. With a difficult demand that we were demanding for an international legislation to end child slavery, the abuses and exploitation of children across the globe. There was no international law until 1998. But when we were marching, and the young tiny children were demanding and chanting, no more guns in tiny hands, no more tools in tiny hands. We want books, we want toys, we want pencils. And when the march ended up in Geneva, in the General Assembly of ILO, dozens of leaders of the world were in tears because the voice, the strong, compelling, moral voice came from children of the world. And that was a concrete contribution, and my trust in the civil society organizations has grown multifold. But it does not mean that all the civil society organizations are like that. Some are driven by very tiny selfish interest. Some are driven by certain agendas, influence of some other forces, and so on. So many complexities. But I think the G20 will show, C20 will show to the world that these 115 or 130 leaders came from 26 countries will make a family. When we say that we have to make this world whole family, let us begin with ourselves. You are sitting here 2-3 days. Try to make this a family. And then we can demonstrate to the rest of the world. Friends, there are so many examples I can give. But I will point out 2 or 3 things here. during pandemic, we have all seen and experienced that how the world is not only interconnected, but it has a deeper feeling and sense of responsibility of interdependency. Ordinary people were giving their plasmas and blood, trying to organize medications. I work across 140 countries in the world, and I was receiving phone calls and emails from my friends across the globe that how not only medical professionals, not only the police people or the governments and civil society, but very ordinary people were able to demonstrate their deeper compassion in solving each other's problem. So people like us thought that this sense will prevail. But unfortunately, this is not happening. And this is a big challenge. And this is a reason to introspect. The rich countries of the world have created a fund. I'm not talking about that fund which has been established by the G20. I'm talking about G7 plus one or two more. $11 trillion money has been allocated under the title of Global Agenda of Action for COVID-19. That was not for vaccines, medications, not health front, but the revival of economy in needy countries primarily, but also in other countries, low-income countries and least developed countries. $11 trillion. We thought that maybe $1, $2, $3, $5 trillion will go to those African, Latin American, and some of the Asian countries. But many of you will be surprised to know that only 0.13% of these $11 trillion, not even 0.5%, not 1%, just 0.13% have been allocated to the poor people, the marginalized people of low-income countries. This is the challenge when we talk of making this world a one family. We have to address some of these economic injustices, political injustice in the global society. We Indians believe in the philosophy of inclusion. Our DNA is driven by inclusion, as you pointed out. Exclusivity makes us static. But inclusion creates dynamism. There are other benefits of it. But take the case of United Nations today. My question is whether the United Nations is able to maintain and promote the core philosophy, the core value of multilateralism and a sense of mutual responsibility and accountability, political justice and protection. This power is eroding. Look at the situation in Afghanistan where young girls are deprived from education. All the efforts have been made for years, for decades. But in the end of the day, Taliban comes and stops schools, colleges for girls. Nobody could do anything. I'm not talking the depression, I am talking about challenge. Ukraine-Russia situation. So many other examples. We need a more inclusive, more dynamic United Nations. That means more inclusive Security Council. Those who are fighting, those who are creating problems, they have the power to veto. More inclusive. Inclusive G20. We have only one African nation in G20. European Union is also a member, but not the African Union. African Union is observer. From India, we should raise the voice that we will fight for the global South. We Indians will stand for the global South under the leadership of our Prime Minister. This is the time to raise the strong voice and advocate for the justice and representation of global South. And that should emerge from this G20 to begin with C20. Not during the pandemic. Pandemic has brought so many bad news for the low-income countries, especially in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. Almost all 48 countries of Sub-Saharan Africa are facing serious crisis, economic crisis and crisis in many other forms. But before pandemic, what has happened? When Sustainable Development Goals have been announced, since I was and my colleagues have been advocating and struggling, campaigning for inclusion of children's issues, not just education but slavery of children, forced labor, etc. in SDGs, the result was there, and this was incorporated in SDG 8.7. So UN Secretary General has appointed me as his advocate of SDG and invited me to address the General Assembly at the time of SDG adoption. So people like us were celebrating and saying that now the things will change, at least in the lives of the most deprived children on the earth, left out children on the earth. But between 2016, when the SDG has been adopted, and 2020, it's the first time in 20 years or more than 20 years, the number of child laborers, child slaves, child trafficking victims has increased from 152 million to 160 million. That was before pandemic. So the challenges are bigger. When I say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I owe a deep moral responsibility we have come out as a group of Nobel laureates, peace laureates, came with a report which we have circulated, and we have spoken to many of the presidents and prime ministers in the world, that only $53 billion annually can help in solving the problem of all children, problem of health, problem of education, problem of protection. Not only that, this $53 billion would also help in protection of all new mothers and pregnant women in all low-income countries. And how much is this $53 billion? This is less than the global 10 days of global military expenditure. Less than 10 days of global military expenditure. So world is not so poor. If this money is put as a global fund or global mechanism for social protection, then it is less than 1.4% of what the Europeans spent in their global protection programs, in their own protection programs, social protection. So we have to have a strong resolve. When we speak for one future, then we have to create the level playing field of common present, and then we will have a common future. I have been asking, and I will repeat it here. In Brazil, Brazil is like my second home. I work in Brazil for many, many years with number of civil society organizations and governments and presidents also. The President Lula is a good friend. I met him not recently, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in jail. And I told that one day when you come out, your fight for hunger will continue definitely, against hunger. But we have to revive the Bolsa Familia program. So the Bolsa Familia program, he just, I think 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, he has announced that he is going to strengthen the Bolsa Familia program. That is one of the best and most successful social protection program in Latin America. Similarly, in Uganda, in Zambia, in many other places, there are a lot of good stories. But I am proud, as a proud Indian, I would say that India has some of the best and most successful social protection programs on this earth. Our midday meal program, our newly launched Vatsalya program, this Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao, these are some of the social protection programs where we have been able to showcase to the rest of the world that there is a need of a global or universal child benefit, where the children can directly get financial support, children who are most marginalized and most left out children. Finally, while thanking you, I could not restrain myself in the presence of Her Holiness Amma and lot of people sitting here in saffron robes, spiritual personalities. But it is not necessary that the spiritual personalities live in only saffron robes. There are ordinary looking people, nice people, bringing this world a better place, making this world a better place, are spiritual people, spiritually driven people, in any religion, in any culture, in any society. I would say, dear friends, world has not yet learned how to walk together. Our Vedic rishis in Rig Veda, so many mantras are there, but one simple mantra many of you might remember, Sangachadhum. The slogan of SDGs today is leave no one behind. Leave no one behind. What a great slogan. But those who are talking about this slogan, they have left many people behind at the cost of others people keeping behind. They are running faster. This is unacceptable. We from India are calling that, let us walk together, hold each other's hand. People who are able to run faster, they have to restrain themselves. That is like a tapasya. To just wait and hold the hand of someone who has left out and left behind. Samvadadhvam. We have to create a culture where we can talk freely, and our language should be language of unison, language of humanity, language of love. Samvadadhvam. So Sangachadhvam Samvadadhvam Samvo Manansi Janatam Deva Bhagam Yatha Purve Sanjananam Upasate. So let us sit together and try to unite our minds and souls. The mantra says. And it says that let us construct a common knowledge based on the wisdom of our ancestors anywhere in the world. Sanjananam upasate. That is the simple meaning of this Ved mantra. Let us create that knowledge. And that is possible only when we do something special. We have globalized economies, markets, data, information, even terrorism, extremism. We have globalized ecological crisis, climate crisis. All these things are the part of our so-called globalization. As Devendra Bhai, you rightly pointed out through Gita's sloka, or Ved mantra, Ten Tyakten Bhunjitha. We have to learn how to consume with strain, with discipline, with control. But here, I would say that when we have globalized everything, we have some good results as well as the flip side. And that idea of globalization came from West. This is the Western way of globalization. I'm not against the West. But being an Indian, I would say that this is the time, this is the land India should lead the globalization of compassion. Let us globalize compassion. Compassion is not sympathy. Compassion is not empathy. When you feel the suffering of others as your own suffering, with a deeper drive to elevate the suffering of other person as your own suffering, then you are compassionate. We are all compassionate, but we kept our compassion in small circles for our own siblings, biological children, husband, wife, friends, etc., etc. Sometimes it's very difficult to say that husbands and wife have really compassionate relationship. Hope it should happen. But this is biological, between mother and child. What you call it? When the child comes in the womb of mother, the whole perspective changes, the emotion changes, the behavior changes. That is driven by compassion. So, compassion is within each of us. I call upon you, dear friends. Believe me that God can never be, Allah can never be, Hamare Bhagwan can never be so meager that they had sent you on the earth with a handful compassion or anything which is handful. We all have the oceans of compassion. We are born with the ocean of compassion. So let us enlarge the circles of compassion. Let us globalize compassion. And that should be the message from this G20. I wish you all success. Thank you.